Imagine a vast landscape swallowed by snow. The air is so cold that your very breath freezes and drifts away like a fragile ghost. For centuries, Native American communities across the diverse climates of North America, from the icy Great Plains to the humid, snow-covered forests of the Northeast, faced not only the physical challenge of finding food and staying warm, but a relentless, invisible enemy: disease. The winter camp, snug with its thick hide walls and central fire, was also a close-quartered crucible where a simple cough could become a community-wide crisis. With no doctors, no pharmacies, and no modern science to rely upon, how did these ingenious people protect their families from the illnesses that the cold breeds, from biting coughs and debilitating fevers to the silent, creeping danger of frostbite and vitamin deficiency? Their survival was not a stroke of luck or simple brute force. It was the result of a profound, generations-old knowledge system, a sophisticated medical science woven from the very fabric of the earth, where every root, every bark, and every puff of sacred smoke held a key to health. This was a science deeply rooted in the belief that the body, mind, and spirit are one, and that healing is an act of restoring balance, or hoju, as the Navajo called it. Tonight, let's step inside the Winter Lodge and uncover the vast, natural pharmacopeia of Native American tribes, exploring the medicines, rituals, and profound spiritual practices that made them masters of survival in the coldest season. We begin not with a plant, but with a philosophy, the understanding that healing starts long before the sickness sets in. Part 1. The holistic foundation of winter wellness. For many tribes, including the Lakota, the Cheyenne, and the Algonquin, medicine was not something separate from daily life. It was embedded in every act of the day. The shelter, the fire, the stories, and the food were all part of a larger medical strategy. A well-constructed teepee, for instance, with its ingenious smoke flaps and insulated inner liner, was a preventative measure, ensuring clean, smoke-free air that protected lungs from the strain of winter. But when illness did inevitably arrive, the focus was immediately on restoring the harmony that the sickness had broken. The primary battleground against disease was often not the body itself, but the spiritual and mental state of the individual. The harshness of winter brought with it a unique kind of mental fatigue, a quiet, insidious despair that could sap the will to live, a psychological toll that we might recognize today as seasonal affective disorder, but which they understood as a spiritual imbalance brought on by the long darkness and the cold's isolation. To combat this, they used what we might call therapy, but which they knew as the essential act of communal connection. Around the central fire, the heart of the lodge, elders would spin tales of creation, of trickster coyotes, and of brave ancestors who survived far worse winters. These weren't mere entertainment, they were vital infusions of hope and cultural memory, reminding the sick and the healthy alike that the community was resilient, that the seasons always turned, and that they were not alone. The simple act of listening, wrapped in a buffalo robe, the gentle voice of an elder weaving a tapestry of warmth and light against the howl of the wind outside, was a powerful mental tonic, a profound medicine that kept the spirit from freezing. Consider the ritual of the talking circle, practiced by the Algonquin and others. Even when confined to the close quarters of the wigwam by a storm, conflicts and anxieties could arise. The talking circle, often using a feather or a sacred pipe to designate the speaker, ensured every voice was heard without interruption. Resolving emotional tension and maintaining social harmony was seen as essential medicine, preventing the stress and internal conflict that could weaken the physical body and leave it vulnerable to disease. When the mind was calm and the spirit aligned, the body was better able to fight. This deep understanding that health is a continuous balance is the bedrock of Native American medicine. It is only after the mind and spirit are attended to that the physical remedies, the gifts of the botanical world, are brought into play, and their pharmacy, a vast natural library written in bark, root, and leaf, was astonishingly sophisticated. Part 2. The Forest and Prairie Pharmacy. Gifts from the earth. When it came to physical ailments, Native Americans relied on an intimate, almost spiritual knowledge of local flora and fauna, a pharmacopeia honed by thousands of years of trial and observation. Every plant in the forest or on the prairie was a potential remedy, and the women, often the primary healers and knowledge keepers, knew precisely when to harvest, how to prepare, and in what quantity to administer these natural cures. We start with the most common winter ailments: fever and pain, and the surprisingly modern remedy found in the humble bark of the willow tree. The gift of the willow and the whispering pine. The simple willow, abundant along the riverbanks of the plains in the northeast, was perhaps the first natural aspirin. The Lakota and Cheyenne, facing the bone-deep aches and fevers that accompanied a severe winter cold or influenza, would harvest the bark from the branches of the willow, particularly the white willow, boil it in water to create a bitter but effective tea. This remedy, known to botanists today, contained salicin, the active compound that would eventually be synthesized to create modern aspirin. By drinking the warm, comforting tea, the patient would reduce fever and ease the severe pain that could otherwise exhaust a sick body, allowing rest to begin the true healing process. This wasn't just folklore. It was biochemistry understood through patient observation. Next to willow bark, the pine and spruce trees offered an equally vital defense against one of winter's most common and often fatal diseases: scurvy. Scurvy, caused by a lack of vitamin C, was a silent predator of the long winter, causing weakness, fatigue, and eventual death when fresh fruits and vegetables were unavailable. The northern tribes, particularly the Algonquin and the Iroquois, knew the secret hidden within the evergreen needles. They would gather the tender young needles of pine or spruce, sometimes even the inner bark of the trees, and steep them in hot water to create a bright resinous tea. This tea, rich in ascorbic acid, vitamin C, was a powerful preventative and cure for scurvy. It not only fortified the immune system, but, when consumed warm, brought a comforting, woodsy scent into the often stale air of the winter lodge. A small but significant boost to both physical and mental well-being. Imagine a family gathered around the fire, sipping this warm, pine-scented brew, knowing that the very essence of the enduring forest was flowing into their bodies, protecting them from the darkness of the cold. The cleansing smoke, sage, cedar, and sweetgrass beyond ingestion. Native American medicine relied heavily on the therapeutic use of smoke, a practice known as smudging. This was not merely a spiritual ritual. It was a practical tool for purification and disinfection in an era before germ theory was understood. When someone in the teepee or hogan fell ill, the air itself was treated. Bundles of dried sage and cedar would be lit, and the smoke wafted over the patient and throughout the dwelling. Sage, known for its sharp cleansing scent, contains natural compounds that are scientifically recognized today as having antimicrobial and antibacterial properties. In a cramped, poorly ventilated winter dwelling, burning sage served as a natural fumigant, clearing the air of not only stagnant energy, but also airborne pathogens. This practice was especially crucial during outbreaks, helping to slow the spread of winter flus and respiratory ailments. The cedar, with its rich, resinous smoke, was similarly used for purification, and was often seen as carrying prayers to the Creator, symbolizing protection and guidance. Sweetgrass, in contrast to the cleansing sharpness of sage, was used to welcome good spirits and positive energy once the cleansing was complete. Its long, braided strands were burned, releasing a vanilla-like sweet aroma that helped to soothe anxiety and lift the spirits of the sick. The scent of sweetgrass filling the air was a signal to the patient, the family, and the community that the process of healing was underway, a sensory assurance that balance was being restored. This holistic process, using smoke to physically disinfect and spiritually renew, shows the inseparable link between medicine and faith that defined Native American survival. Part 3. The Earth's poultices and salves, skin and wound management. The intense, dry cold of winter, coupled with the dangers of hunting and daily tasks, brought constant risk of injury, frostbite, and severe chapping. For these external threats, Native American healers turned to the land's salves and poultices. The fat barrier. Tallow and bear grease, the most immediate and essential medicine for the skin, came from the very animals that provided food and shelter. Rendered animal fat, buffalo tallow on the plains, bear grease in the northern forests, or seal blubber in the Arctic, was a life-saving skin application. When mixed with red ochre or fine ash and applied to exposed skin, it created a waterproof, windproof barrier. This was not just a protective layer, it was a preventative medicine, actively blocking the drying, cracking, and rapid heat loss that leads to frostbite. Bear grease, in particular, was prized for its high-fat content and durability, able to endure an entire day on a hunter's face without wearing off. Think of a Blackfoot hunter, his face coated in a layer of ochre-tinted bear grease, silently moving through a snowy landscape. This application was a profound act of self-care and survival. It protected the pulse points, the ears, nose, and cheeks, where the cold could bite deepest, ensuring that the warm blood circulating from the core was not rapidly chilled at the skin's surface. The green underneath, moss and poultices. Even when the world was blanketed in snow, the healing power of the forest floor could be found. For wounds, cuts, or abrasions that risked infection in the cold, the Algonquin and Iroquois turned to specific types of moss found growing beneath the snow, often on the north side of trees or near frozen streams. Certain sphagnum moss varieties were known to possess natural antibacterial properties and incredible absorbency. This moss was gently cleaned and applied as a cold poultice to the wound, often held in place with a sinew bandage. The moss drew out impurities, slowed bleeding, and critically, helped to stave off the infection that, in the absence of antibiotics, could turn a simple cut into a deadly threat. This demonstrated a deep understanding of natural antisepsis, using a resource that was available even in the harshest depths of winter. Furthermore, yarrow, a feathery plant that was harvested and dried in the warmer months, was carried in small pouches by hunters and travelers. When chewed or pounded, its leaves and roots could be applied directly to deep cuts to staunch the flow of blood, acting as a natural coagulant. The knowledge of which moss to use, which bark to boil, and which dried leaf to chew constituted a sophisticated, portable medical kit carried by the community itself. Part 4. The internal regulators. Roots, berries, and broths beyond immediate ailments and external wounds. Native American medicine focused on maintaining the internal engine of the body, the digestive system, the blood, and the joints, all of which suffered under the strain of a limited winter diet and constant cold. The root of strength, ginseng and echinacea, in the northeast and parts of the plains. Certain hardy roots were considered vital internal fortifiers. Ginseng, a prized root known for its adaptogenic properties, was used to combat the chronic fatigue and exhaustion that plagued communities during long periods of scarcity and cold. Brewed into a warm, earthy tea, or chewed raw in small pieces, it was believed to help the body adapt to stress, maintaining energy levels and mental focus when the physical resources were low. It was a subtle medicine, a slow-release fuel for the spirit and the metabolism. Echinacea, often called purple coneflower, was perhaps the most famous immune-boosting herb of the Plains tribes, including the Lakota. The root of the plant was chewed or mashed and used internally to ward off sickness. It was an early preventative medicine, used when the first signs of cold or flu appeared, the theory being that a strong internal defense could fight off the illness before it took hold. Chewing the root provided a powerful, numbing sensation, a physical sign that the medicine was active, and the belief in its power was as much a part of the cure as the chemical properties of the plant itself. The winter lifeline, cranberries and wild fruits, while the large, calorie-dense staples like pemmican, buffalo fat, and dried meat provided the necessary fuel for warmth. They often lacked the micronutrients required for long-term health. The preservation of berries and wild fruits was a crucial medicinal act. Cranberries, known for their tartness and incredible ability to last when dried, were mixed into pemmican or steeped into warm drinks. These berries were a critical source of vitamins and antioxidants, helping to keep the blood clean and the immune system functioning. Moreover, the fruit's natural acidity was understood to aid in the prevention of urinary tract issues, a minor ailment made potentially serious by prolonged exposure to cold and dehydration. Bone broth, the liquid gold of healing in terms of liquid nourishment for the sick. Nothing surpassed the healing power of bone broth. This practice, central to nearly all tribes, was an ultimate expression of the zero-waste philosophy that underpinned Native American survival. When large game was processed, the bones, especially joints and marrow-rich femurs, were not discarded. They were cracked open and simmered over the fire for hours, sometimes days, creating a rich, gelatinous broth packed with essential fats, protein, and minerals. For a feverish or weak patient, this broth was liquid gold. It provided easily digestible nutrition, helped hydrate the body, soothed sore throats, and, through the sheer caloric density of the marrow fat, provided the heat fuel necessary for the body to fight the infection. The steam rising from a bowl of hot bone broth in a sick teepee was not just an aroma. It was the smell of life being stubbornly sustained against the forces of the cold. Part 5. The ceremonial chamber, the sweat lodge, and spiritual healing. No, discussion of Native American medicine can be complete without exploring the Inupi, or sweat lodge ceremony, a ritual of purification and healing considered by many tribes, such as the Lakota and the Ojibwe, to be the most powerful medicine available, especially in the cold months. The sweat lodge itself, a small, dome-shaped structure made of willow saplings covered in hides or blankets, was a ceremonial chamber designed to connect the physical body to the spiritual world. The act of rebirth. The ceremony involved heating stones in an external fire until they glowed red hot. These grandfather's stones were then carefully carried into the dark, womb-like lodge and placed in a central pit. Water, often infused with cedar or other medicinal herbs, was poured over the stones, instantly producing clouds of intense, purifying steam. Participants sat inside, stripped down, in pitch-black heat, praying, singing, and enduring the intense, therapeutic heat. Physically, the intense sweating served a clear medicinal purpose. It drove impurities and toxins from the body, cleared the lungs, and stimulated circulation, a kind of extreme internal recalibration desperately needed in the stagnant air and repressed energy of winter. But the true healing was spiritual. The darkness represented the beginning of creation, and the heat was the life force of the Creator. Emerging from the lodge, often into the shock of the freezing winter air or snow, was an act of rebirth, a complete cleansing that restored both physical vigor and spiritual balance. This was proactive medicine, designed to strengthen the community against the cold before it could take hold. The vision and the dream. Furthermore, winter was the time when many tribes, especially the Ojibwe, believed the veil between the physical and spiritual worlds was thinnest due to the long darkness. This made dreams and visions particularly powerful tools for diagnosis and healing. An elder or medicine person might spend days in isolation, or a sick person might be encouraged to share their dreams upon waking. These dreams were not dismissed as random thoughts. They were interpreted as messages from the ancestors or the spirits, guiding the healer to the root of the ailment, whether it was physical, emotional, or spiritual. The act of sharing and interpreting the dream in the quiet of the wigwam became a diagnostic tool, providing insight into the patient's state of hoju, balance, and guiding the application of herbs, or the need for a specific ceremony. This approach reminds us that the most effective medicine often comes from deep listening, not just to the body, but to the patient's inner world. Part 6. Specialized tribal adaptations. From desert to Arctic, the medicines used were dictated not just by the disease, but by the geography. A Lakota healer on the plains had a different arsenal than a Navajo healer in the arid southwest, or an Inuit healer in the Arctic. The Navajo and the desert pharmacy. The Navajo, residing in their earth-insulated hogans, relied on the hardy, drought-resistant plants of the desert. Juniper berries and sagebrush were staples. Juniper berries, with their sharp, piney scent, were used both as a food additive and a diuretic, brewed into a tea to cleanse the body and treat kidney ailments. Sagebrush, different from the white sage of the plains, was burned and brewed as a strong tea to treat stomach issues and colds. Crucially, the Navajo used the elaborate multi-day blessing way and night way ceremonies as profound acts of medicine. These ceremonies, involving intricate temporary sand paintings made of crushed minerals and plants, were designed to restore the patient's harmony with the universe. The patient would sit on the sacred painting, absorbing its power and becoming physically woven into the story of creation and balance. This practice, conducted in the warmth of the hogan, was the highest form of healing, using art and story as medicine. The Arctic's extreme medicine. In the unimaginable cold of the Arctic, the Inuits' pharmacy was almost entirely animal-based. Plants were too scarce. Their key medicinal defenses were pure nutrition and animal-derived nutrients. Raw meat and liver from seals and caribou were consumed, not just for survival, but for medicine. This practice ensured the ingestion of high levels of vitamin C and vitamin A, nutrients lost in cooked meat, which were essential for preventing scurvy and maintaining vision in the dark winter months. Seal oil and blubber, while used for light and warmth, were also crucial medicines. Consuming the pure, high-density fat provided the massive caloric fuel necessary for the body to maintain its temperature. Furthermore, the oil was used externally as a salve to treat dry, cracked skin and minor wounds, acting as an insulating, healing barrier against the extreme dry cold. Their survival was a testament to extreme biochemical efficiency, turning their food into their most potent medicine. Part 7. The Keeper of Knowledge. The role of the healer. The effectiveness of this vast natural pharmacy rested entirely on the knowledge, skill, and spiritual power of the healer, or medicine man-woman. These individuals, often called by the spirits and trained from a young age through rigorous apprenticeships, were the living libraries of their community's medical knowledge. The diagnostic eye. The healer's role began long before the illness. They were students of the wind, the sun, and the animal behaviors, all considered indicators of the health of the environment and, by extension, the community. When called to a sick lodge, the healer performed a sophisticated holistic diagnosis. They assessed the patient's pulse, temperature, and physical symptoms, yes, but they also took into account the patient's emotional state, their dreams, their social standing, and any perceived spiritual imbalance. A fever was not just a temperature, it was a sign of a deeper disruption. The preparation and ritual. The preparation of medicine was as crucial as its ingestion. The healer knew when to harvest the willow bark, often in the spring or fall when the sap was running, how to dry the sage to maintain its potency, and how to mix the bear grease with ochre to achieve the perfect consistency for a protective salve. Harvesting was always done with a prayer and an offering, tobacco or corn pollen, an act of reciprocity acknowledging the plant's sacrifice. To take without offering was believed to diminish the plant's power and disrespect the life force of the earth. Once prepared, the administration of medicine was often a ritual. A simple cup of willow bark tea might be served with a specific song or a chant, directing the spiritual power of the plant toward the ailment. The power of suggestion and faith in the healer's authority was a potent medicine in itself, calming the patient and allowing their body to dedicate its energy to healing. The healer did not merely give a dose. They performed a transfer of power, turning a simple root into a sacred cure. Part 8. The legacy of prevention. Health as a daily practice. Ultimately, the most powerful medicine Native Americans used to survive winter was prevention, a daily, meticulous practice of health that spanned from the structure of their homes to the preparation of their food. The hygiene of the teepee. The high standards of hygiene within the winter camp were a crucial preventative measure. Every morning, bedding was aired out or fluffed by the fire to remove trapped moisture from breath and sweat, preventing the dampness that could lead to chills, skin breakdown, and mold. The teepee and hogan were regularly smudged to purify the air, especially after visitors or a sickness had passed. Even waste disposal was carefully managed to keep the camp clean and reduce the attraction of scavenging animals that could carry disease. Movement and circulation. Despite the cold, Native Americans understood the need for movement. Hunting, wood gathering, and camp maintenance were necessary acts of labor that kept the blood circulating and the body's internal fire burning hot. On days when deep snow or blizzards kept the community confined, smaller, less strenuous activities were employed. Playing games like the moccasin game, communal sewing, or light dancing inside the lodge. This was an instinctive form of exercise, preventing the stagnation and muscle wasting that can set in during prolonged periods of inactivity and maintaining the body's capacity to generate its own heat. Mental fortitude. Finally, the maintenance of mental fortitude was the paramount preventative medicine. The constant reinforcement of community bonds, the certainty of the healer's knowledge, and the belief in the sacredness of the natural world provided a psychological armor. When a severe blizzard howled outside, threatening to break the lodge poles and steal the heat, the family inside found strength not just in the thickness of the buffalo hide, but in the shared certainty that they were prepared, that their ancestors had endured worse, and that they had the knowledge, the medicine, to see the sun rise again. Their medical system was not a list of prescriptions. It was a testament to their profound, interconnected relationship with the earth. This comprehensive approach to medicine, where physical symptoms were treated with botanicals, spiritual fatigue with ceremony, and community tension with dialogue, ensured that Native Americans not only survived the harshest winters, but often emerged from them with their cultures, bodies, and spirits renewed. The legacy of their wisdom continues to resonate today, reminding us that the best healing often comes, not from a laboratory, but from the earth itself, and from the unwavering strength of human connection. Part 9. The Medicine of Adaptation. Surviving the Unseen. Threats. The winter brought not only the obvious threats of cold and scarcity, but also subtle, persistent dangers that required specialized medicinal knowledge, ailments that crept into the body slowly and invisibly, demanding constant vigilance and specific remedies. One such hidden threat was the relentless drying effect of the cold wind on the mucous membranes and the respiratory system. The defense against winter coughs, cedar and balsam. For the northern tribes, where the air was consistently harsh, respiratory illnesses, colds, bronchitis, and pneumonia were a constant concern. The air inside the tightly sealed lodges, though warm, could become stale and dry, irritating the lungs. Their medicine focused on opening the airways and soothing inflammation. Cedar and balsam fir, known for their highly aromatic oils, were cornerstones of this defense. The resin and leaves of these trees were not only burned for smudging, but were also brewed into steams. A family member might place the cedar or fir needles into a pot of boiling water near the sick person. The steam, rich with natural terpenes and decongestant oils, would fill the immediate area, easing congestion and soothing the inflamed lining of the nose and throat. This was an early form of vaporization therapy, a simple but effective way to ensure the patient's lungs could draw a full, comfortable breath, a critical factor in recovery. Furthermore, the resins themselves, which weep naturally from cuts in the bark of these evergreens, were collected and chewed. The sticky, pine-scented resin acted as a mild expectorant, helping to clear mucus from the chest, and the act of chewing it slowly provided a continuous, low-dose exposure to its antibacterial compounds. This use of tree sap as a chewing gum and a medicinal prophylactic demonstrates the ingenious way Native Americans integrated healing into daily, portable practice. The battle against constipation, roots and inner bark are less discussed, but medically significant winter problem was constipation and general digestive sluggishness. The winter diet, heavy in dried meats, preserved fats, and limited in fresh, fibrous vegetables, could slow the digestive system, leading to discomfort and other health complications. To counteract this, healers often prescribe tonics made from the inner bark of certain trees, such as the cascara or alder. The inner, living layer of the bark was carefully scraped, dried and then steeped into a bitter tea. This medicine was known to act as a mild, natural laxative, helping to keep the system moving and preventing the buildup of toxins that could weaken the body. Unlike modern, harsh chemical laxatives, these preparations were carefully dosed and often combined with other gentle herbs to prevent dehydration. It was a proactive recognition that internal flow and function were just as vital to survival as external warmth. Part 10. The Unseen Force. Animal Medicines and Superstitions. While plant life formed the core of the Native American pharmacy, animal products played a crucial, often overlooked medicinal role, transcending mere nutrition to become focused, potent cures. This use of animal products was always wrapped in spiritual significance, recognizing that the animal provided not just its body, but its unique power to the healing process. Liver. The night blindness. Cure for the Arctic tribes. In particular, the long, dark winter brought the risk of night blindness, a severe deficiency in vitamin A. The Inuit understood, through centuries of observation, that eating the raw liver of caribou or seal was the potent and immediate cure. While most organs were cooked, the liver was often consumed raw or lightly frozen because the heat of fire would destroy the crucial, fat-soluble vitamins needed to restore night vision. This was a direct, life-saving application of nutrient-based medicine, a form of sight restoration essential for hunters navigating the darkness. However, they also knew the danger. The liver of a polar bear was so hypersaturated with vitamin A that its consumption was toxic, a knowledge that served as a critical medical boundary passed down through fear and necessity. Marrow and joint lubrication. We have already discussed bone broth for its caloric density, But the bone marrow was also used medicinally as a targeted treatment for joint health. The intense cold of winter exacerbated the aches and pains of joints, especially in elders and hunters. Marrow, rich in collagen, fats, and essential oils, was prized. It was eaten directly, not just for heat, but with the belief that it would lubricate and strengthen the bones and joints, making the body more resilient against the punishing cold and physical strain of the season. The ritual of cracking open the large femur bone and scooping out the rich, buttery substance was a ceremonial act of fortifying the body against the winter's inevitable wear and tear. Snake oil. More than a myth. While the term snake oil has become synonymous with fraud, it had a genuine origin in Native American medicine. Certain tribes, particularly in the Southwest, did use rendered fat from the rattlesnake as a healing salve. The fat, carefully prepared, was rubbed onto arthritic joints and aching muscles. It was believed to possess anti-inflammatory properties, and modern science has since confirmed that the fat of certain snakes does contain high levels of beneficial omega fatty acids. For the Navajo, the serpent, with its deep connection to the earth and the renewal of shedding its skin, also carried a powerful spiritual symbolism of healing and transformation, making its physical fat a doubly potent medicine against the aches of the cold earth. Part 11. The culture of care. Social medicine in the Winter Lodge. The deepest, most profound medicine of the Native American winter was the culture of unreserved care, a practice of social solidarity that prevented isolation, fear, and neglect, the ultimate weaknesses in the face of the cold. The rotation of vigilance. Survival was not left to chance. The concept of the night watch, as detailed in the survival strategies, was also a medical necessity. The person on watch did not merely tend the fire and check for predators. They were the primary medical observer. They moved silently, checking the breathing, the warmth of the skin, and the restfulness of the children and elders. They were the ones who noticed the first subtle sign of illness, the dry cough, the feverish brow, the unnatural restlessness. This constant rotating vigilance ensured that no sickness was allowed to take hold and progress unchecked through the night. The knowledge that someone was awake, watching and caring, was a psychological anchor for the entire sleeping camp. The gift of the giveaway. The giveaway ceremony, practiced by tribes like the Lakota and Cheyenne, often took place in winter or was planned for in the cold months. It served an essential medical purpose, the redistribution of wealth to ensure the most vulnerable were provided for. When a family celebrated a milestone, they gave away blankets, hides, or dried food to those who needed it most. This act of sharing was a profound preventative medicine against scarcity and despair. It guaranteed that a family hit by misfortune, a bad hunt, a long sickness, would not be left without the insulating furs, the nutritious food, or the warm robes required for survival. The ceremony cemented the social contract. No one starves, no one freezes, while the community has breath. The grandparents' lap, lullabies and low-tone healing for children. The most immediate medicine for illness or fear was the presence of the grandparent, the elder. In the long winter nights, children slept nestled beside these knowledge keepers, listening to the soft, rhythmic sounds of the lodge. The lullabies and quiet, rhythmic songs of the elders, often sung in a low, humming tone, were a powerful form of emotional regulation. The consistent, low-frequency sound provided a continuous, soothing input that helped the child's nervous system relax and conserve energy, allowing the body's natural healing mechanisms to work. This use of sound, rhythm, and proximity demonstrates a deep, intuitive understanding of pediatric comfort and care, a medicine of the heart and the ear that cost nothing and was always in abundance. The Native American medical system was, in its essence, a system of profound self-reliance, adaptation, and spiritual connectivity. It taught that the best way to survive winter was to live in constant, respectful dialogue with the earth, ensuring that when the inevitable sickness came, the mind was strong, the spirit was ready, and the forest had already provided the cure. And as we continue to move through this exploration, we find that this legacy of wisdom extends into every facet of their future planning. Part 12. Preparing the medical kit, harvesting and storage. The existence of this vast winter pharmacy depended entirely on the precise, timely, and respectful work of preparation done during the warmer months. No medicine could be gathered from the frozen ground, so the winter's survival was secured months in advance. The meticulous preparation and storage of herbs and roots was an art form, primarily overseen by the women who were the lead botanists, pharmacists, and surgeons of the community. The timing of the harvest. Healers knew that the medicinal potency of a plant varied with the season. Roots, such as echinacea and ginseng, were often harvested in the late fall after the plant's energy had retreated from the leaves and concentrated in the root when its medicinal power was at its peak. Willow bark was often gathered in spring or early fall when the sap was running, and the bark could be easily peeled from the tree without damaging the core. This specialized knowledge ensured that the winter's supply was of the highest possible quality. The drying and storage rituals. Once harvested, the herbs and roots had to be processed and stored to maintain their potency for the entire cold season. Herbs like sage, yarrow, and wild mint were carefully bundled and hung to dry in the sun or in the smoke of the lodge, ensuring they were thoroughly dried before being stored. Drying not only prevented rot, but also concentrated the essential oils that held the healing power. Roots were often sliced, dried, and then stored in tightly woven birch bark containers or rawhide pouches. These containers, often sealed with pitch, tree sap, to keep out moisture and pests, were then placed in cool, dark underground caches. The cache acted as a natural refrigerator, maintaining a stable temperature that prevented the degradation of the medicinal compounds. The act of storing the medicine was a quiet ritual of faith, a promise to the community that the earth's bounty would endure the barren months. The medicine pouch, a portable defense, a personal medicine pouch carried by hunters, travelers, and, especially healers, contained the portable, immediate use defense kit. These small pouches, made of softened leather or rawhide, held a carefully selected collection of immediate remedies. Dried yarrow for staunching blood, a small piece of echinacea root for chewing to ward off sickness, a pinch of sage or tobacco for spiritual offering, and a small lump of hardened bear grease for treating frostbite or dry skin. This pouch was a personalized essential toolkit, ensuring that no member of the community was ever without the basic resources to handle a medical emergency miles from the main camp. The careful selection and daily replenishment of this pouch was a testament to the continuous, conscious preparation that defined their survival philosophy. Part 13. The Medicine of Adaptation. Responding to epidemics, Native American communities were, tragically, unprepared for the viral and bacterial epidemics that arrived with European contact, but their traditional medical systems offered some means of defense, or at least a powerful spiritual response to the overwhelming loss. Isolation and quarantine. While not understood in the modern sense, the principle of isolation was practiced intuitively. When a new, severe illness, like smallpox or influenza, swept through a camp, the sick were often moved to a separate, smaller shelter, away from the main camp. This was a desperate act of quarantine, an attempt to protect the main body of the community by containing the disease, even if it meant the sick had to endure greater isolation. Healers and close family members, often accepting the fatal risk, would tend to them in the isolation lodge, relying on heavy smudging, intense prayer, and traditional remedies to either break the fever or ease the passage of the dying. Ceremony in crisis. In the face of devastating, unknown epidemics, the reliance on profound ceremony became even more critical. When physical remedies failed against a widespread, invisible enemy, the spiritual leaders turned to their most powerful rituals to restore balance to the universe, believing that the sickness was a sign of a spiritual rupture. The wiping the tears ceremony and other rites of communal mourning and spiritual alignment were performed, not as a cure for the body, but as a medicine for the collective soul. These rituals allowed the community to process the incomprehensible loss, maintain their spiritual integrity, and find the strength to endure, ensuring that the culture and the memory of the people survived, even if many individuals did not. The resilience of Native American medicine, even in the face of catastrophic new diseases, was its unyielding connection to the spiritual. It taught that while the body might fail, the community, the culture, and the spirit must survive, offering a profound lesson in collective endurance that transcends mere physical survival. Part 14. The Living Legacy. Medicine in the Modern Era. The legacy of Native American medicine is not a chapter confined to history. It is a living, breathing body of knowledge that continues to influence modern health and wellness. a testament to the enduring power of their methods. Many of the remedies they perfected in the isolation of winter survival are now recognized and utilized globally. Modern rediscovery. The two most famous examples are perhaps willow bark and echinacea. The active compound in willow bark, salicin, was the progenitor of aspirin, a global pharmaceutical staple. Echinacea, once a sacred root chewed by plains warriors and healers, is now a multi-million-dollar supplement, globally recognized for its immune-boosting properties. Similarly, the use of pine needle tea as a source of vitamin C has been rediscovered as a valuable, natural defense against scurvy, especially in survivalist and natural medicine circles. The modern embrace of these ancient remedies confirms the accuracy and effectiveness of the generations of observation that Native American healers performed by firelight. The principle of holistic healing. Perhaps the most significant contribution to modern medicine is the concept of holistic healing. Native American medicine never separated the physical illness from the emotional or spiritual state of the patient. This philosophy is now central to modern integrative medicine, which recognizes that mental stress, emotional trauma, and spiritual disconnect can manifest as physical illness. The sweat lodge, once a purely spiritual act, is now recognized for its benefits in detoxification, stress reduction, and communal therapy. The talking circle is used in counseling and conflict resolution, validating the Native American understanding that social harmony is preventative medicine. Stewardship as health. Finally, the core principle of stewardship, of giving thanks and treating the earth with respect, is being recognized as the ultimate long-term health plan. The Native American practice of taking only what is needed, leaving an offering, and ensuring the health of the entire ecosystem is now the foundation of sustainable ecological and health movements. They understood that you cannot have a healthy person on a sick planet. Their medical philosophy was not merely about curing the sick. It was about keeping the planet well, ensuring that the botanical pharmacy would always be there for the generations to come. The story of Native American winter medicine is a profound reminder that true survival requires a deep and unshakable connection to the earth, a respect for all living things, and an understanding that the warmth we need to endure the darkest night comes not just from the fire we build, but from the community we sustain and the spirit we refuse to let freeze. And as we look to the future, with its own rising temperatures and environmental unknowns, the wisdom of the willow, the cedar, and the humble bone broth remains a guiding light. Part 15. The Rituals of Resilience. Preserving the healer's knowledge. The knowledge system of Native American medicine was highly vulnerable, existing primarily in the memory of the healers and elders. Unlike a modern medical library, this vast pharmacy was stored in human minds, making its preservation a critical act of survival. Winter, ironically, became the key season for this transfer of vital knowledge. The apprentice by the fire formal apprenticeship was the primary method of transmission. A young man or woman, often chosen for their empathy, intuition, and acute observational skills, would begin training under an established healer from a young age. Winter, when travel was impossible and the community was confined to the lodge, offered the perfect classroom. Wrapped in hides, safe by the fire, the elder would recount the vast botanical library, one plant at a time. The knowledge was rarely written down. Instead, it was delivered in stories, songs, and mnemonic devices that aided memory. The apprentice learned not just the properties of yarrow, but the story of how the first warrior used it to stop bleeding, the song that should be sung when collecting it, and the prayer of thanks to be offered. This layering of cultural, practical, and spiritual information ensured the knowledge was not forgotten. The seasonal review. Winter was also the season for the seasonal review of the medical kit. The healer would go over the stored supplies with the apprentice, checking the dried sage bundles for potency, examining the stored roots for signs of mold or degradation, and discussing why a particular batch of willow bark might be more effective than another. This review was a hands-on examination of the previous year's successes and failures, a continuous process of refinement based on lived results. They were, in effect, performing a peer review and quality control on their own medicine, a practice that cemented accuracy and practical application. Passing the pulse point wisdom, a specific body of knowledge vital for winter survival, was the treatment of the extremities. The elder would teach the apprentice to read the signs of frostbite long before they became obvious. The difference in sensation between merely cold skin and skin that had begun to set like frozen meat. The apprentice was taught the precise technique for rubbing the area with snow, a counterintuitive treatment designed to restore circulation gradually, avoiding the rapid, damaging thaw that could lead to tissue death. Following this, the careful application of warmed but not hot bear grease was taught to soothe and insulate the restored tissue. This was a critical lesson. The medicine was in the method and the timing, not just the material. The Winter Lodge, therefore, was transformed nightly into a living university, where the most essential knowledge, the difference between life and death, was quietly and patiently transferred from one generation to the next, ensuring the community's library of resilience would endure. Part 16. The Medicine of Community. Collective healing. While the healer had specialized knowledge, the act of healing was a communal responsibility. The community itself was a powerful force for recovery, acting as a giant, collective medical system that sustained the sick. The communal broth pot. When a sickness struck, the entire community contributed to the patient's nourishment. Even in times of scarcity, families would pool their best resources, a sliver of stored pemmican, the last handful of dried berries, or a choice bone for broth, to ensure the sick person received the densest, most restorative food. This was an act of both practical and symbolic medicine. The patient knew that the entire community was invested in their recovery, a powerful psychological boost that reduced the fear and isolation that can often prolong sickness. The bone broth, simmering over the communal fire, became a metaphor for the collective warmth of the tribe, an unbreakable circle of support. The rotation of comfort. Comfort and hygiene were rotated among neighbors. It was not expected that a mother or spouse tend to the sick person day and night alone. Instead, neighbors would rotate shifts, ensuring the patient was cleaned, kept warm, and given drinks and food at regular intervals. This rotation prevented caregiver burnout, maintained vigilance, and ensured a continuous high standard of care. The sick person, seeing the faces of their neighbors, their community, sacrificing their rest to tend them, was given an undeniable medicine of belonging. This system recognized that sickness was a burden on the whole, and the entire community was required to lift it. The medicine of shared laughter. Even in the most dire circumstances, humor and lightness were seen as necessary medicine. Stories told in the lodge were not always serious tales of survival. Many featured the trickster character, Coyote, Raven, Nanabojo, whose antics and foolishness brought gales of laughter. Laughter in this context was a physical release. It stretched the lungs, broke tension, and released endorphins. The healer understood that a lightened spirit sped recovery. The ability of the community to find joy in shared humor, even when confined by the cold, was a profound act of collective resilience. A refusal to let the darkness of winter or the shadow of illness extinguish their vital spirit. The Native American Winter Lodge was therefore not just a physical shelter. It was a complex, self-sustaining medical ecosystem, built on the principles of collective care, botanical knowledge, spiritual alignment, and profound respect for the earth. Their survival through the harshest seasons was not a miracle, but a system of unwavering commitment to the health of the individual as an inseparable part of the well-being of the whole. Part 17. The Science of the Sacred. The precision of herbal dosing. The remarkable efficacy of Native American medicine was rooted not just in spiritual faith, but in a precise, almost scientific understanding of dosing and preparation. Knowledge that was transferred not in milligrams, but in the texture, smell, and taste of the medicine. The pinch and the handful. Measuring by sensation healers did not use scales or graduated cylinders, yet their dosages were surprisingly consistent. Measurement was based on sensory inputs, learned through years of sensory training. The pinch, a pinch of sage or tobacco for an offering, was a small, consistent amount, usually between the thumb and forefinger, ensuring the offering was respectful but not wasteful. The handful. Roots like echinacea for a tonic might be measured by a handful of slices added to a pot of water. The size of the handful was calibrated by the healer's own hand, an organic measurement that became consistent over time. The taste test, the potency of a tea. such as willow bark for fever, was often determined by its bitterness. The apprentice learned to taste the brew and know when the right level of bitterness had been reached, the point at which the salicin content was medically effective but not so strong as to cause nausea. This reliance on sensory calibration, rather than abstract numbers, made the system robust and easily replicated, even in the chaos of a harsh winter storm. Preparation. Specificity. Tea versus decoction versus infusion healers distinguished between different preparation methods based on the plant part being used, demonstrating a precise understanding of extraction chemistry. Infusions. Steeping. Used for delicate plant parts like flowers and leaves, e.g., wild mint for digestive issues or spruce needles for vitamin C. The material was simply steeped in hot water, as prolonged boiling would destroy the volatile oils or vitamins. Decoctions. Boiling. Used for hard materials like roots and bark, e.g., willow bark or ginseng. These required prolonged simmering to break down the tough cell walls and extract the potent active compounds. Poultices. Mashing. Used for external applications where the fresh, macerated plant material, e.g., yarrow or certain mosses, was applied directly to a wound. This intentional variation in preparation ensured that the maximum medicinal power of the plant was consistently extracted, turning the simple act of boiling water into an act of pharmaceutical precision. Part 18. The medicine of time. Seasonal rhythms and the clock of the Earth Native American medicine was intrinsically tied to the seasonal clock and the rhythms of the earth, an understanding that allowed them to predict and prepare for winter ailments long before the first snowflake fell. The fall harvest of resilience. The intense work of late summer and early fall was a race against the frost to gather the final, most potent medicines. Digestive bitters. Roots for bitter digestive tonics, like gentian or dandelion root, were dug up in the fall when their active compounds were highest, ready to counteract the heavy, fat-rich diet of the winter. Fat storage. The preparation and rendering of bear grease and tallow were timed precisely to coincide with the major autumn hunts, ensuring the supply of vital external and internal salves was secured before the animals retreated, or the cold made hunting too difficult. The winter of treatment. Winter itself was often reserved for two types of treatment: acute crisis, immediate, life-saving interventions for fever, cough, and frostbite using stored decoctions and salves. Spiritual alignment, long, multi-day ceremonies like the night way or sweat lodge rituals, which required the community to be static and confined, making winter the ideal season for these profound, time-consuming acts of collective healing. The Native American healer's calendar was not a human invention. It was the rhythm of the sun and the earth. Their survival depended on respecting this ancient clock, preparing when the earth offered its gifts, and resting and seeking spiritual renewal when the cold commanded silence. This profound connection to the seasonal cycle ensured that the community was not merely reactive to winter's threats, but proactively armed with every remedy the earth could provide. Part 19. The silent medicine. The use of animal bones and antlers beyond the soft tissues and the fat, the hard materials of the animals, bones, antlers, and hooves, were integrated into the medical and cultural ecosystem of survival. These were not just tools. They were the silent medicine of the winter lodge, carrying the strength and essence of the animal into the life of the person. The bone broth toolkit. While the bones themselves were used for broth, the implements crafted from them were essential for medical processes. Bone knives and scrapers were used by healers for delicate work. Preparing a piece of birch bark for a wound dressing, slicing a root into precise pieces for a decoction, or scraping fine dust from an antler for a spiritual ceremony. The use of bone ensured that no metal contamination touched the natural medicine, preserving the purity of the plant material. The precision of these tools was critical, turning an act of butchery into an act of pharmaceutical preparation. Antler for splints and healing charms. Deer or elk antlers, hard and dense, were occasionally shaped into lightweight, rigid splints for setting broken bones, a common risk during slippery winter hunts. The antler was meticulously cut, scraped smooth, and then tied with sinew, providing the necessary stability for a limb to heal in the cramped conditions of the lodge. The antler was a medicine of structure, ensuring that the body could knit itself back together. Furthermore, small pieces of antler or bone were sometimes carved into amulets or charms, worn by the sick or the very young. These charms carried the spiritual power of the animal, the resilience of the elk, the speed of the deer, imbuing the wearer with that animal's strength to fight the illness. This was a physical manifestation of belief, a continuous, palpable reminder of the spiritual resources available to the person. Hoof gelatin, the medicine of restoration. The hooves of animals, often discarded in modern life, were a medicine of last resort and restoration. When boiled for a prolonged period, the hooves yielded a thick, sticky gelatin, rich in collagen and other connective tissues. This gelatin was consumed as a concentrated food source for the ill, especially those recovering from severe muscle wasting or injury. It was believed to restore the body's own structure, the hair, the nails, the joints, acting as a profound, slow-working internal medicine. This practice was the ultimate expression of the zero-waste philosophy, ensuring that the animal's sacrifice provided structural integrity right down to the most seemingly useless parts. Part 20. The medicine of the mind. Combating winter despair. The survival of the mind was often more difficult than the survival of the body in the cold, isolating darkness of winter. Native American communities had a sophisticated, communal psychiatry that actively worked to counter the mental fatigue and despair that the season could bring. The rhythmic pulse of the drum. The drum was a profound instrument of mental and spiritual medicine. Its deep, rhythmic pulse, felt rather than heard, was believed to be the heartbeat of the universe, or the earth itself. In the winter lodge, during long ceremonies or simple evenings, the steady drumming provided a continuous, grounding anchor against the chaos of the wind and the isolation of the dark. For the mentally fatigued, the rhythm was restorative, a reminder of the steady, unwavering cycle of life. For the sick, it was believed to direct healing energy into the body, focusing the mind away from pain and toward the rhythm of the spirit world. The simple low sound of a drum echoing across the snow-covered camp was a collective sound of resilience. The trickster's therapy. The stories of the trickster, coyote, raven, or nanabojo were a powerful form of mental medicine. These stories, full of humor, chaos, and often inappropriate antics, served multiple purposes. Social valve. They allowed the community to laugh at chaos and the absurd, releasing tension that had built up in the cramped winter quarters. Moral contrast. They provided a clear, safe example of foolish, selfish, or reckless behavior, reinforcing community values by showing what not to do without direct confrontation. Symbolic hope. The trickster always fails, but he always survives and continues his journey. This symbolized the resilience of the human spirit. Failure and chaos are inevitable, but so is survival and continuation. Sharing these stories in the warmth of the lodge was a form of communal therapy, inoculating the mind against despair by reinforcing the virtues of adaptability and humor. The medicine of color. Even the application of body paint, often mixed with fat tallow for protection, carried a mental medicine. The colors themselves had meaning. Red, often ochre, mixed with tallow, symbolized life, warmth, and the strength of the sun. White, clay, or light ash symbolized purity and the cold itself, often used to connect the person to the power of the season. Applying these colors was a psychological act of empowerment, a visual affirmation that the person was ready to face the elements, turning the protective salve into a spiritual shield. The combination of fat, physical defense, and color, mental strength, was a perfect example of their holistic approach to survival. Part 21. The final guard. Children, elders, and the medicine of the vulnerable. The true measure of Native American winter medicine was its effectiveness in protecting the most vulnerable, the very young and the very old. Their survival required not just general remedies, but specific, unceasing attention. The newborn's warmth strategy. A newborn, having the least mass and the highest rate of heat loss, was kept in a constant state of hyperprotection. The mother's furnace. The baby was swaddled in the softest rabbit or beaver furs and kept in direct contact with the mother's body, beneath the shared buffalo robes, using the mother's core temperature as its primary heat source. This skin-to-skin contact was the first, most powerful medicine. The lullaby's rhythm. The steady rhythm of the mother's and grandmother's lullabies, often sung in a low, continuous monotone, was a physiological regulator, keeping the baby's heart rate and breathing steady, promoting deep, restorative sleep essential for growth. Warm water broth doses. The most critical nourishment was often a warm, continuous supply of breast milk, supplemented, if necessary, with sips of warm bone broth, the gentlest, most calorie-dense liquid available, administered slowly and patiently. The elders' circulatory care. Elders, suffering from the natural slowdown of circulation, required medicine focused on maintaining internal heat and joint comfort. Heated stone placement. Heated stones were placed strategically near the elders' joints and feet, wrapped in hides. This was a continuous localized heat therapy designed to boost circulation to the extremities, preventing the cold from setting deep into the bones. Gentle movement. The healer might encourage the elder to perform small, rhythmic movements, even while sitting or lying down, a slow stretching of the hands and feet to manually encourage blood flow without expending vital energy. The gift of fat. Elders were prioritized for the fattiest, most easily digestible portions of the meal, such as pure bone marrow or liquefied tallow, ensuring their slowing metabolisms had the necessary high-octane fuel to generate internal warmth throughout the night. The survival of the vulnerable was not left to individual effort. It was the ultimate communal medical project, a testament to the fact that in Native American culture, life was a continuous sacred circle of giving and receiving. By providing the youngest and the oldest with the deepest, most sustained care, the community ensured the continuity of its future and the preservation of its past. And in that lay the final, most profound medicine of all. Part 22. The medicine of observation, reading the body's language. The expertise of the Native American healer was deeply rooted in the art of observation, a skill honed to read the subtle, non-verbal language of the body, especially crucial when diagnosing the sick in the dim, flickering light of the winter lodge. This practice was their form of laboratory testing, relying on biological cues that transcended language. Reading the pulse and breath. The healer learned to take the pulse not just for speed, but for its quality. A weak, thready pulse might indicate deep cold or spiritual fatigue, while a rapid, bounding pulse signaled fever or intense physical distress. They would also listen to the patient's breath. A wet, rattling sound suggested fluid in the lungs, a danger in winter, while short, shallow breaths might indicate anxiety or pain. This was often done with the healer's ear pressed directly to the patient's chest, absorbing the inner sounds and rhythms of the body, the color and texture of the skin. In the low light, the healer paid meticulous attention to the color and texture of the patient's skin, particularly the lips, nail beds, and inner eyelids. Paleness or a bluish tinge was an immediate sign of severe cold or lack of oxygen. The presence of unnatural dryness or the first subtle waxiness of early frostbite was detected by the texture, a cold that felt hard and unyielding, demanding immediate, focused care. By reading these small, visible signals, the healer could determine the necessary remedy long before the ailment became catastrophic. The language of the dreams. As mentioned, the dreams shared in the quiet of the lodge were a key diagnostic tool. A dream was not a symptom. It was a map to the internal state of the mind and spirit. A dream of being chased by a dark shadow might signal a spiritual rupture or overwhelming fear that required a specific healing ceremony, while a dream of a flowing river might be interpreted as a positive sign of healing and renewal. By integrating this psychological input with the physical symptoms, the healer achieved a holistic diagnosis that modern medicine is only beginning to replicate. This intense focus on reading the body's silent language and the mind's hidden maps meant that Native American healing was highly personalized. The remedy for a fever in one person might be willow bark and a sweat lodge, while for another, it might be a talking circle and a cedar smudging. each treatment tailored to the unique balance required for that individual to find. Hoju once more. Part 23. The Science of Smoke. Beyond spiritual cleansing, we revisit the use of smoke, not just as a spiritual tool, but as a critical agent in managing the microclimate and hygiene of the winter dwelling, a practice far ahead of its time. Smoke as an insect repellent. In the close confines of the winter lodge, pests and insects were a source of discomfort and disease. The continuous, low-level burning of aromatic wood, like cottonwood, and herbs, like sage and sweetgrass, served as a natural, non-toxic insect repellent. The smoke's volatile oils and particles created an environment that discouraged flies, lice, and other vectors of disease, maintaining a level of sanitation essential for long-term communal living. Smoke as a desiccant and preservative. The gentle smoke from the central fire, managed by the adjustable smoke flaps, also acted as a low-grade desiccant, helping to dry and preserve the very structure of the lodge. The buffalo hides of the teepee, exposed to the smoke, became more pliable and more resistant to rot and freezing, ensuring the shelter's integrity for years of use. This continuous smoking also helped to preserve stored items, extra hides, sinew, and even some meats hung high in the cone of the teepee, turning the fire's byproduct into a fundamental tool of resource management. Smoke for internal comfort. The smoke, especially from fragrant woods like cedar, offered a constant, low-dose aromatherapy that provided profound comfort. The scent, clean and woodsy, masked less pleasant odors and provided a continuous sensory anchor, a constant reminder of the safety and warmth of the lodge. For the sick, breathing this slightly smoky, warm air was soothing, a mild medicine constantly at work on the respiratory system. The management of smoke, therefore, was a precise multifunctional art. It was spiritual cleanser, physical disinfectant, preservative and comfort agent, all managed by the fine adjustment of a simple hide flap and a knowledge of which woods burned clean and which burned heavy. This mastery of the air itself was a non-negotiable component of Native American winter medicine. Part 24. The Final Ritual. Preparing for the thaw. As the winter finally began to yield, and the first signs of the spring thaw appeared, the medicine of the community shifted from survival to preparation for renewal. The end of winter was a medically precarious time, as dampness, rapid temperature shifts, and the sudden availability of certain foods could cause new illnesses. The spring cleanse. The thawing of the land was met with a series of cleansing ceremonies designed to purge the accumulated stagnation of the long winter. Strong bitter teas, often brewed from the roots of dandelion or sarsaparilla, were consumed as spring tonics. These teas were believed to clean the blood, stimulating the liver and kidneys to flush out the heavy fats and toxins accumulated during the winter diet. This was a proactive medical intervention, resetting the body's internal chemistry for the coming season of fresh growth and strenuous activity. The ritual of farewell. The ceremonial burning of old bedding materials and used smudging bundles marked the transition. Old damp grass and furs that had served their purpose were ritually burned or aired out far from the camp. This act was both spiritual, cleansing the space of the sick energy of the winter, and physical, removing mold, pests, and decaying material that could spread disease in the damp spring air. It was a final, critical act of sanitation, ensuring that the camp moved into the spring, renewed and unburdened by the remnants of the cold. The medicine of the first green. The arrival of the first green shoots was a cause for immense medical and spiritual celebration. The first spring greens, high in vitamins and nutrients, were consumed with ritual and gratitude. The appearance of wild onions, fiddlehead ferns or dock leaves was met with specific prayers and careful, conservative harvesting. These first fresh foods were medicine, correcting the nutritional deficiencies of the preserved winter diet and celebrating the return of the Earth's ability to heal and sustain. The Native American journey through winter was not a passive wait for the thaw. It was an active, continuous, and deeply intentional engagement with the principles of health, ensuring that every member of the community, from the smallest child to the oldest elder, was not only physically sustained, but spiritually and mentally fortified. Their medical system was a testament to the fact that the greatest pharmacy is the earth itself, and the most powerful medicine is the knowledge of how to live in harmony with its unchanging, sacred rhythms. Part 25. The Intimate Pharmacy. Medicines of connection and reciprocity. The depth of Native American medicine can also be understood through the lens of reciprocity, the belief that one must give back to the source of the medicine to ensure its continued power and abundance. This belief guided every interaction with the Earth's pharmacy, the offering of thanks. Before harvesting any plant for medicine, whether a piece of willow bark, a handful of sage, or a delicate root, the gatherer performed a small ritual of thanks. A pinch of tobacco or corn pollen was placed at the base of the plant, or a short prayer was spoken. This act was not mere superstition, it was a covenant. It ensured that the plant understood its life was being taken for a sacred, necessary purpose, and it reminded the human of their role as a caretaker, not a consumer. This mindfulness prevented overharvesting, ensuring the sustainability of the resource. If the gatherer took all of the plant, the medicine would be gone for the future. By observing reciprocity, they practiced sustainable medicine, the medicine of shared burden. When a highly effective medicine was discovered or harvested, it was not hoarded. It was shared. The discovery of a new ginseng patch or a particularly potent batch of bear grease was a resource for the entire community. This sharing was a medical mandate, recognizing that a sick neighbor could quickly become a source of contagion for the entire camp. By ensuring that the healing power was distributed widely, they fortified the entire collective against the threat of illness. This practice turned the medicine itself into an agent of communal solidarity. The healer's fee. The gift of value a healer was rarely paid in currency, but their services were never free. The payment, a skillfully tanned buffalo hide, a woven Navajo blanket, or a bundle of precious tobacco, was a gift of equivalent value. This exchange served several functions. Reciprocity. It honored the healer's time, knowledge, and risked economic support. It provided the healer with the resources, hides for a new lodge, food for their family, necessary to continue their work for the community. Psychological commitment. The act of giving a valuable gift required the patient and their family to commit fully to the healing process, increasing their belief in the efficacy of the treatment. This system of payment ensured that the medicine flowed freely, while the healers, the keepers of this life-saving knowledge, were properly sustained. Part 26. The Architecture of Comfort. Lodge Design as Medical Care. The very structure of the Native American winter home was a masterpiece of medical engineering, designed to reduce strain on the body and mind during the months of confinement. The conical advantage, tepi, the teepee's conical shape, and the management of its smoke flaps were essential for preventing chronic respiratory issues. The design created a natural, low-pressure system that actively pulled smoke out, preventing the buildup of noxious fumes like carbon monoxide that could be fatal in a sealed space. The inward draft that fed the fire, drawing fresh air from the low gap, meant that the air closest to the sleepers was constantly refreshed, preventing the stagnant, microbe-rich air that spreads infection. The structure was, in essence, a continuously ventilating clean air system. The Earth's Embrace, Hogan, the Navajo Hogan, built of thick logs and covered in packed earth, was the ultimate defense against the harsh desert cold and the intense summer heat. Medically, its thick walls provided thermal stability. The Hogan maintained a remarkably constant interior temperature, preventing the rapid swings in heat and cold that strain the human body and weaken the immune system. For the sick, this stability was a powerful form of care, allowing the body to dedicate its energy to fighting the disease rather than regulating its temperature. The door always facing east was a spiritual medicine, welcoming the cleansing light and warmth of the rising sun into the home, ensuring the family began each day with spiritual renewal. The snow igloo's gentle warmth, Inuit. The Inuit igloo was the most extreme example of medical architecture. Built from compacted snow, which is 90% trapped air, the structure maintained an interior temperature remarkably stable, often just around freezing, even when the outside temperature plummeted to 50 degrees Celsius. This stability, coupled with the low-lying tunnel entrance that trapped warm air, prevented the wind and extreme cold from ever reaching the occupants. For the Inuit, the igloo was an incubator, protecting the body's energy reserves and preventing the constant, exhausting battle against hypothermia. The floor, often raised with ice blocks and covered in caribou furs, was the ultimate insulated sanitary bed. The Native American winter dwelling was, therefore, an intentional, life-sustaining vessel, a testament to the fact that the most effective medicine is often the place you call home, a structure built with ancestral wisdom to keep the cold from ever touching the heart. Final part. The enduring medicine of the spirit now. As the last embers of our exploration fade, we come to rest on the profound truth of Native American winter medicine, that survival was always a holistic endeavor, a balance of the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. Their medical system was not a collection of isolated tricks. It was a continuous act of living in harmony with the environment and the community. The physical warmth provided by the buffalo robe was inseparable from the spiritual warmth provided by the storyteller's voice. The bitter, fever-reducing tea of the willow bark was not consumed without the purifying smoke of the cedar, nor was a single hunt undertaken without the stabilizing presence of the drum's rhythm. Every physical defense, from the bear grease protecting a child's cheek against frostbite to the marrow strengthening an elder's joints, was backed by a spiritual assurance, the reciprocity of the gift, the vigilance of the community, and the unshakable certainty that their life was valued. The ultimate lesson they offer us today is that true resilience is not found in technology or material excess, but in connection. It is in the willingness to stop, to listen to the whispers of the echinacea root, to honor the sacrifice of the buffalo, and to turn to your neighbor in the dark of the long winter night. Their survival was the result of a commitment to the whole, a covenant that no one would be left alone against the cold, and that the earth, if treated with respect, would always provide the final life-sustaining cure. The knowledge lives on, passed down not in sterile books, but in the hands of the healers, in the scent of burning sage, in the rhythm of the sweat lodge, and in the quiet certainty that after every dark winter, the green world will return. We leave the warmth of the winter lodge, carrying with us this profound wisdom, knowing that the most powerful medicine is the enduring strength of the human spirit, sustained by the earth and wrapped in the arms of the community.